React components. React components. And the error is gone. So React components are like functions that return HTML elements. Components are independent and reusable bits of code. They serve the same purpose as JavaScript functions, but work in isolation and returns HTML via a render function. This render function. So component comes in two types. We have the class component and we have the function component. So in this section, we'll concentrate on class components, but I'll also show you how to write functional components. So React is all about reusing code. It can be a smart component, to insert some other components, in separate files. To do that, you have to create a file with .js file extension and put the code inside. So let me just show you what I have. Let's say I want to create a website, and you know that a website do have a navigation bar, the body, and the footer. So here I can say, let me just create a folder and call this component so that we have, separation of concern. So all my components are going to be here. I can say here I want to have header.js. So here, this is going to be a React component from React, and inside there I want to have, let me just write const. This is going to be const header, because this is a function that returns, this is going to return something back. And what is it returning? Is returning a div. So this is going to return a div, and inside this div I'm going to have h1 that says this is the header. So I'm going to do the same thing, and here I will export this so that I can use it in other code. So this is going to be the default header, and here I'll say I'll copy this now. Then let's say we want to have the main body. I can say this is main.js, and here I will, just to save time, I'm going to change these things, and so this is the main, and let's say a website do have footer. So this is going to be footer.js, and inside this, let me just paste this again. Then I'm going to, so I'm going to say this is the footer. Yeah. So this is the footer. So I'll save this now, and don't worry, I'm going to explain everything I've been doing. So inside here, instead of hello, this is my application. Okay, let's bring this back, and let's delete this. We don't need it again. And inside there, we want to render our app component. Don't worry, I will explain everything. So let's see what we have. So I say that I have hello world. This is my first React application. And if you go into your app.js, that is what you have. Hello world, this is my. So we want to bring in, we are building our application. We built the header, we built the footer, we built the main. We want to bring everything in. So if you want to bring that in, what you do is you do import. What do you want to bring in? I want to bring in the header from where I want to bring it from. Where is it located? Is located inside the component folder, and inside the component folder I have my header. So I've explained all this in the previous sections. Then we also need the main. Oops, it's going to start with capital letter. Main from where? From component. I need it from component, from main. Then what else do I need? I need the footer. So import, import footer from where? From component / footer. So I have this. Then I can use this in my code now. So I have header. I have the main. Oops. The main. Then I have the footer. You can see that. So easy, so beautiful, so clean. So if I save this now, let's see what we have. Something is wrong. Check the render method of app. So let's go back and check. What do we have? Index. We have render app from app. What's happening here? So if I save this now, let's see what we have. It's not running. What could be the problem? Let's see if we go back into index. Let's save this. So we import app from app and everything should be running. So if we reload this now, what do we have? Check something is wrong somewhere. So if I go back, let's recheck. We are export defaulting app, fine, this is fine. Name, this is fine. Footer, this is fine. And here, what could be the problem? So let me cancel out these things. Let's see where the error is. So presently there's nothing. So if I the main, do we have anything? Yep. I think the problem is from the header. So what do we have in the header that is causing the problem? Did I save it? I saved it. So let me save and undo. So if I come here now, we should have our header. Okay, I failed to save the header the other time. So that is why we have the issue. You can see that this is kind of straightforward. So if you have millions of developers working on this project, someone can be working on the header project, someone can be working on the footer feature, somebody else can be working on the main feature. So if I have, let's say this is just for the home page. If I have another page now and I need to use the header again, I don't have to go back and be editing. I just have to do what? Import the header and use it right away. So if I build, let's say I build about us page and I need to use the footer, I don't have to go back and write in the footer code. I just have to import it and use it and everything is fine. My footer is going to be working fine. So I'm going to, so if you notice some things here, in the header, in the main, in the footer, there are some common things. The first thing is you have to start by importing React at the top. You have to import React. You know, this is telling like, okay, let's say I comment this out. So if I comment this out or I delete that, you know, you see that React must be in scope while using JSX. So if you want to use JSX, something like this, writing HTML inside JavaScript, you have to what? Bring in React. So React is going to tell your code like, you know what, whatever we are writing here is going to be in JSX and, you know, don't throw any error, everything is fine and we are okay. So if I bring back my React and I save now, everything is going to run fine and we have no errors. Compile successfully, no errors. So to be able to use JSX, you have to bring in React in every file that you want to use JSX. And it has to, you know, you have to export that particular component. So I just use this as an example. And let's say we want to write a component called a class, a car, you know. So if I go back here and I do new file and .js, so to be able to write DSSA, you have to import React from React. Don't worry, you have to be typing this every now and then because the more you type, the more your fingers, you know, get used to that and your brain also. So when creating React components, the component name must start with uppercase. So inside there, I want to create a car component. So it must start with uppercase. I will do something like class, then car. And the component has to include the extend. If you remember this from our class section, React JavaScript class. So it's going to extend React dot components. You just have to get used to this syntax. So the component has to include the React dot components. It has to extend this and it has to have this statement. And this statement is going to create you know, an inheritance to the React component and gives you component access to the React component function. The component also requires a render method, and this method returns an HTML element. That is huge. It's mouthful. So don't worry, I'll explain everything. So let's just return something now. So if I return let me say hi, let's say I am a car. So this car is introducing itself. So I am a car. And you have to export this out. So in this file, I'm saying this is going to be the default function for this file. So I'm exporting that class out, which is class car. So now your React application has a component called car, which returns, H2 elements. To use this component in your application, you have to import it. So let's just go back. Let's do this because I just used this once for example the other time. So I'm deleting this because we don't need them. So if I save this now, it's not going to get anything out because there is nothing inside. But now I want to use my car component. So let's say I've built a car component. I'll say import car from where we have the car inside the components folder. Oops. The component folder, and inside the component folder we have the car component, and inside here, you use a syntax similar to our normal HTML syntax. If you want to bring in an image, what do? We have this image syntax in HTML. So we can, it's just like we built our custom HTML tag, so which is car, and you do it like as if you are writing HTML. So you bring in it like this, and if I save this now, let's see what we have. I've saved that. We have I am a car. How interesting. So this is called a class component. You can see the difference between, this is called a function component because we wrote a function and it is returning something, and here we wrote a class and it is returning something. I know you'll be like, what is the difference? A function component returns HTML. You can see that it's returning HTML and behaves pretty much the same way as a class component. But a class component have some additions, and we are going to be using class components in this section. So in the latest version of React.js, they have something called React hooks, which we are not going to go into in this particular section. And in React hooks, you can write function components same way as class components. You can bring in hooks, and they are going to have some methods and all those as class components. But don't worry, it's something we are going to go into later. So now we have our car components. So once again, your React application now has a car component. So you can refer to this car component as normal HTML, except that in React, you must start with uppercase. So that is why you see that I'm starting everything here with uppercase. You can see that header, we have uppercase. So that's just the rule with React. Then inside this class component, we have something called component constructor. So if there is a constructor function in your component, this function will be called when the component gets initiated. The constructor function is where you initiate the component's properties. So in React, component properties should be kept in an object called state. So we have constructor, we have the constructor, and we have a state. But don't worry, I would explain what state means in later session. So we have states, and this is going to be an object. I will explain what it means in later sessions. Oh, don't worry. So the constructor function is also where you honor the inheritance of the parent component by including super. We've talked about this during our what was it called? Our class JavaScript class section. So this super executes the parent component constructor function, and your component has access to all the functions of the parent React components. So let's just create a constructor function in the car component and add a color property to our car. So we can just say this dot state equals color. So let's say the color of our car should be red. Yeah. So equals color red, and you know. So let's use the color property in the render function and see what we are going to get. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to say I am a red car. So how do we do that? I am a red car. We say this dot state. You can see that this is an object dot color. So if we do I am a this dot state dot color. And what is this dot state dot color? This dot state dot color is red. So if I save this now, let's see what we are going to get. You see that we get something. I am a red car. So I can just come here and change this to, let's say I have blue, and I save now. You see that it's going to change. I am a blue car. So there is another way of handling component properties, and which is something called props. Props. I think I have to open, let me open a JavaScript file, then be writing all these things inside. So I'm going to do tests.js. Is it JS? Yeah. So I'm going to be writing this down. So we've done class components. Oops. Class components, function components, Then presently I'm talking about, okay, I've talked about states. So presently I'm talking about props. So props, another way of handling component properties by using props. So what are props? Props are like function arguments, and you send them into the component as attributes. So let's use an attribute to pass the color to car. So inside our app.js, we have the car that is being used. So we can pass the color to the car. So we can do color equals red. So if I do color equals red here, and I go back into the car component, let me just close all this we are not using, then open this to the side so that we can have access to that anytime. Okay, so if I go back here, so let me just delete this. I can do this dot props instead of state, this dot props dot color dot color. So if I save this now, before we have I am blue car, you see that has changed to I am a red car. So components, how about having components in components? We can refer to components inside other components, like we've done the other time. You can see that I have, let me delete this. I can do this, I can delete this as a whole. So if I save this now, everything is working fine. So you can see that the other time I brought in footer into app.js, which gets rendered in my page. I can also bring in inside there, I can bring in components inside components inside components. For example, I can bring in header component from, where is it located? The same place, which is header, and I can render my header here, but there is going to be a problem, which we've actually talked about the other time. So if I say this now, this is going to give some, some errors, because we have multiple elements, and these elements should be wrapped within another element. So this is going to be the parent element, and inside there we can have the header, and we are not going to have any issue at all. So if I save this now, You know, if I say this now and I check my page, you see this is the header and I'm a red car. So that is beautiful. And we can also do something. Let's say I have a car component and I also want to have a garage component. So I can just do garage.js, and inside there, I will do the same thing I've been doing. I have to import React because we want to use GSS. I will do React, import React from React. Then from here, I can say class garage extends React. Then instead of writing React.components, you can do something called destructuring, which is object destructuring. So I can do component, oops. So instead of writing React.component every time, I can bring in components here. Then here, I don't need the component again. I can just say extend, I don't need the React. I can just say extend components, and you can see the difference. Then I want to render, what do you want to render? I want to render something that returns something, and this is going to return, it has a parent div, and inside this parent div, I want to return some elements like h1. I can say who lives here, who lives in my garage, and you know, I can bring in this car component to reply that like, okay, I am car component. So I can just say import car from car, and here I can render that car component. You see that React is very, very beautiful. So I have to export default, then garage. So if I save my code now, we are not going to get anything. Nothing is going to change. Why? Because we are calling something and that component inside here. So I just have to call the garage. So I'm going to garage, and inside there, we don't need this attribute. I just do garage. And if I save this now, let's see what we are going to get. Oops, who lives in my garage? We have I am a car. But inside this car, let's say we don't have this. So we don't need this header. So I can just delete this header. Then we have our code running as ever. So if I check now, who lives in my garage? I am a car. You can see that. So using React is very, very beautiful. So React props are like function agreements in JavaScript and attributes in HTML. Props are also how you pass data from one component to another as parameters. So to send props into a component, you use the same syntax as HTML attributes. You know, we can say inside the garage, I want to add an attribute. I can say the brand, let's say the color equals red. The color equals red. Then the brand of the car should be what? Should equals, let's say Toyota, for example. So Toyota. And inside this car, I can, I can say, I can use that props. So I can say H3, I am of brand. Then I will say this dot props dot brand. Let's close this. So if I save this now, let's see what we are going to get. You see that? So that is the power of using React. So if you have any variable to send, we've been sending string. It's not just string. You can send any variable. You can send a variable, you can send a string, you can send an array, you can send, objects. So that is the power of, let's send a variable and let's see how this looks. So before I return this, let's say I want to have const car name equals Toyota. Instead of having it there, I'll just do Toyota. And here I'll say brand equals. So if I do car name, then there's going to be an error. You can see that that is in red. So if I save this now, we are going to have errors. Why? You can see that Java React is pointing to that particular place that you have the error. So that if you are writing your code, you know where the error is, you know where to go to, you know how to debug your code, and you know it has that power. And that is one of the beauty of using React. So it says there is an error here. So that means I have to pass this inside curly brackets. So if I save this now and I go back, you know, we have this compiling successfully. And you can also have an object passed across as, you know, attributes. So let's say I have car and I have an object that contains the information about the car. And this object has, you know, some object properties like name, which has a value of Toyota, and it has the model. I'm just using this as an example just to show you the kind of things you can pass through the props. So we have Camry, and what else can we have? We can have the year. Let's just stay as our base for now. So I can just come back here and say brand equals what? Car info. So if I pass this, then I come to car component, I can use this. So what do we have there? We have Toyota, then we have Camry. So I can just come here and say, you know, let's use constructor in this particular example. So I can just come here and say constructor, take the props, and, you know, super props. So I know you are like, why? Why do we have to do this? You know, if your component has a constructor function and the props, you know, you are passing props across to that particular component, the props should always be passed to the constructor and also to the React component via the super. So if you do it this way, then if you are writing a constructor function, you must pass it across. So React props are only, they are read only. You can't change their values. You will get an error if you try to change their values. So that is that. Then the other time I did something which is this does states. So let me just pause. Let me stop it here and